A bakery sign crushed me to death, and the first thing I saw after opening my eyes was a professor eating my dog. The dog was made of bread, which somehow made the situation worse. I was standing in the center of a white summoning hall with flour on my hands and 30 students laughing around me. A small creature no longer than my forearm had been on the stone table a moment earlier. I had shaped it from dough because that was all the test crystal had given me. 4 legs, round ears, a tail that looked like a twisted dinner roll. Then it had blinked. It had looked at me. And when the professor raised a hand, the little bread dog had stepped in front of me and growled. That should have ended the argument. Instead, Brock picked it up, tore off its head with his teeth, chewed twice, and swallowed. The hall went silent for half a second. Then the laughter became twice as loud. Brock wiped crumbs from his black teaching coat. "Ordinary animated food," he said. "No contracted soul. No beast core, no elemental signature, no combat value." I stared at the crumbs on his sleeve. The little thing had moved without strings. It had obeyed me without a contract. More importantly, it had tried to protect me. Brock turned to the scoreboard, where every student's test result was being recorded in glowing letters. One by one, respectable classes had appeared beside respectable scores. Wolf Collar, Iron Hawk Binder, Fire Lizard Keeper. Then my line appeared. Arvin, Baker, 0. A boy near the front laughed so hard he had to hold his stomach. That was Devore. His summoned silver jackal sat beside him with a polished collar around its neck. The beast had cost more than everything I had owned in my previous life, including the apartment where the bakery sign had finished me. Devore leaned toward the students around him. Maybe he can defeat monsters by giving them breakfast. More laughter. I did not answer. I had learned something useful during my first death. Heavy signs did not care how offended you were. Neither did numbers. Brock tapped my score with one finger. A 0 means you lose academy housing privileges for contracted summoners. You also lose access to the main training yards, beast medicine, and subsidized cores. A clerk beside the wall cleared his throat. "There is an unused room below the old cooking club." Brock smiled. "Perfect. Put the baker near the kitchen." The crowd laughed again. I looked at the scoreboard once more. 0. Good. 0 was easy to improve. I was given 1 blanket, 1 cracked cup, and a key that looked older than the academy itself. By sunset, I was standing beneath the main dormitory while the other students carried trunks toward warm rooms above me. My room was below ground. The ceiling was low. 1 wall was damp. The bed had 3 legs and a brick pretending to be the 4th. Across the corridor was the old cooking club, where 6 students shared a stove that smoked like an angry chimney. That was where I met Luma. She was kneading dough in a wooden bowl when I entered. She had tied her hair back with a plain strip of cloth, and there was flour on her cheek. She looked at my academy badge, then at the word baker etched into it, then at the empty plate in my hand. "Did Brock really eat it?" she asked. I stopped. "You saw?" "I was at the back of the hall." She pressed both hands into the dough. "It moved before he touched it." That was the first serious sentence anyone had said to me all day. "Yes." "And it protected you?" "Yes." She nodded once. "Then his test was wrong." That was also the first time anyone had said that. The cooking club had 1 sack of cheap flour, a jar of salt, half a bottle of oil, 3 onions, and enough money to make a rich person laugh. I counted it. 28 copper coins. Luma saw me looking. "The academy gives us 12 silver coins each month. There are 7 people registered. Rent for the room and fuel takes 9. Food takes the rest." I converted the numbers automatically. 1 silver was 100 copper. The club received 1,200 copper each month, and nearly all of it disappeared before anyone ate. "How much does a basic familiar contract cost?" I asked. Luma gave me a strange look. "The cheapest legal one?" "Yes. About 30 silver. More if you need a collar, blood ink, or registration." 3,000 copper. I looked at the flour. "How much did this sack cost?" 40 copper. My mood improved immediately. That night, after everyone else went to sleep, I went into the old club room and locked the door. The moonlight came through a small basement window. I put flour into a bowl, added water, and began kneading. Nothing happened at first. Then I heard a voice. Not outside me, inside. calm, clear, without emotion. My useless class had reached its first choice. Baker of life, master of dough forms, emperor of the bread army. The words came one after another, not in a glowing window, but directly into my mind. I almost laughed. The academy had called Baker the worst class in the hall. My hidden progression apparently disagreed. I chose Baker of life. The moment I did, knowledge settled into my hands. Not recipes, rules. Anything I shaped from dough with my own hands and baked with my own heat could awaken as a familiar. That was all. One rule. Simple enough for a child, terrible enough to break the academy. I shaped another dog. This time, I made it smaller than the first. Flour, water, a pinch of salt. Total cost was less than 1 copper coin. I put it into the iron stove and waited. The smell reached me first. Warm wheat, toasted crust, a little salt. My stomach growled. Then something scratched the inside of the stove door. I opened it. The little bread dog jumped down. It landed on all 4 feet. Its crust was golden. Its eyes were 2 dark baked seeds from the club shelf. Steam came from its back. It sneezed flour. I stared at it. It stared back. Sit. It sat. Stand. It stood. Bite the chair. It ran to the nearest chair and attacked one leg with the determination of a tax collector. The chair won. Barely. I picked up the dog and tested its weight, speed, and bite against objects around the room. Then I made a second one with twice as much salt. The difference was immediate. The first dog cracked when I dropped a wooden spoon on its back from shoulder height. The second did not. I repeated the test 3 times. Same result. Then I pressed both dogs against the edge of the table until the first one broke. The salty dog lasted roughly 1/3 longer. So salt increased hardness by about 30%. That was the first hidden consequence. I wrote nothing down. Paper could be stolen. I memorized it. 1 bread dog cost less than 1 copper coin. The cheapest normal familiar cost 3,000 copper before food and medicine. Even if my dog was 100 times weaker, the numbers were still stupid. I could build 3,000 attempts for the price of 1 legal contract. The door creaked behind me. I turned. Luma stood there in a sleeping robe, with a kitchen knife in one hand. She looked at the 2 bread dogs, then at me, then back at the dogs. One of them walked over and sat on her foot. She lowered the knife. I knew it. You came here with a knife because you knew it? I thought someone was stealing food. The salty dog barked. It sounded like a dinner roll hitting a table. Luma covered her mouth. For 1 second, I thought she was frightened. Then she started laughing. Not at me, at the dog. The creature wagged its twisted tail harder. I put 3 copper coins on the table. That is enough flour for several more. She stopped laughing. You are going to make more? I am going to find the limit. She looked at the stove, then at the shelves. We have oil. I looked at her. She looked at me. 10 minutes later, we were experimenting like criminals with access to a bakery. Oil changed the dough completely. A thin strip, shaped like a snake, bent around a cup without cracking. A normal strip broke after 2 turns. The oil version survived 7. Flexibility increased by more than double. Salt for armor, oil for movement. I found dried red pepper in a jar near the back. Luma raised 1 eyebrow. That belongs to the club. How much? 2 copper for what is left. I paid 2 copper. The third dog came out red-brown. When I ordered it to bite a damp rag, the rag began to smoke. Luma and I stared at the smoke. The dog sneezed. A spark shot from its nose and burned a black mark into the wall. We both looked at the wall, then at each other. We are not getting our deposit back, Luma said. That was our first shared secret. By dawn, I had spent 9 copper coins. For 9 copper, I had produced 8 working familiars. 3 were simple dogs. 2 were salty, heavy defenders. 2 were oil-rich runners. 1 was a pepper dog that had already tried to set a mop on fire. I still had enough dough left to make breakfast. That part mattered. I shaped flat rounds, brushed them with oil, added chopped onion and salt, then baked them beside the familiars. The smell woke the whole club. 6 students came downstairs one after another, hair messy, eyes half closed. They stopped when they saw the table. Bread was stacked in warm layers. The crust cracked when torn. Steam escaped from the center. Onion had turned sweet at the edges, and the oil made the surface shine. Beside the plates sat 8 tiny creatures, waiting in a straight line. No one spoke. Then the pepper dog sneezed. A spark landed in an empty cup. One student whispered, "What?" Luma tore a piece of bread and dipped it in a bowl of salted oil. Arvin made breakfast. She pointed at the familiars. And an army. The club exploded into noise. By the time the morning bell rang, 12 people had come down from nearby basement rooms to see the bread animals. By the second bell, there were 20. By the third, someone had posted a note on the public board upstairs. The zero-score baker had made living bread. That was not the wording I would have chosen. It was effective. I carried one salty dog to class. Brock saw it immediately. So did everyone else. Devore leaned back in his seat. "Did you make another snack?" The students laughed. Brock did not. His eyes stayed on the dog. "Put that on the testing stone." I did. The testing stone measured force, endurance, obedience, and magical activity. Devore's silver jackal had scored 180 combat points the day before. A basic contracted rat usually scored around 20. My first bread dog had never been tested because Brock had eaten it. The stone flashed. 14. The room erupted. Devore slapped the desk. 14! I have boots stronger than that. I looked at the score. 14 was better than I expected. Brock folded his arms. A legal familiar must survive the impact test. He picked up the Academy's training hammer. The tool was designed to strike with enough force to disable a creature around 20 points. Brock raised it. He looked at me. "Still want the test?" "Yes." He swung. The hammer hit the dog's back. The table shook. Several students winced. The dog flattened. Then it rose again. A crack ran along its crust, but it stayed standing. The laughter stopped. Brock's face changed. Not much. Enough. I pointed at the hammer. Again. He hit it a second time. The dog stumbled. It stood. A third strike finally broke one rear leg. The stone updated the result. 22 endurance points. The combat score remained 14, but the endurance was now above the minimum for a legal familiar. 30 students watched the number glow. Devore stopped smiling. Brock stared at the damaged dog. "What did you do?" "Added salt." Someone in the back laughed once, then realized I was serious. Brock's jaw tightened. "That is not how summoning works." I know. It was the wrong answer for his pride. It was the correct answer for me. At noon, the Academy registration clerk sent for me. The rumor had reached the administrative floor before lunch. I entered a small office where Brock, Davor, Luma, and 3 student witnesses were already waiting. The clerk placed a form on the desk. "Unclassified familiar. Provisional registration. Fee is 5 silver. I looked at the form. 5 silver was 500 copper. My entire army had cost 9. "No." The clerk blinked. Brock smiled again. "Then it cannot be used in Academy missions." I put the salty dog on the desk. "Your rules say the fee is 5 silver for a contracted creature." The clerk hesitated. "Yes." "This creature has no contract." Brock's smile vanished. The room became quiet. I continued. "No blood ink, no beast core, no binding collar, no summoned soul. You already declared that publicly yesterday." Luma covered a small smile with her hand. Devore looked at Brock. The clerk looked at Brock too. That was the pleasant thing about public humiliation. Witnesses turned memory into a weapon. The clerk pulled a thick rule book from under the desk. He read 3 pages, then 5, then 11. Finally, he looked up. "There is no fee category." Brock's face went stiff. So provisional registration is free until the board defines one. The 3 student witnesses started whispering immediately. By sunset, everyone would know. The zero-score baker had found a free familiar. Devore stood. "This proves nothing. A 14-point bread animal cannot complete a real mission." The clerk lifted another sheet. "There is a beginner pest mission open today. Cellar beetles under storage building 3. Standard reward is 4 silver. 400 copper. I had spent 9. My mind did the multiplication before anyone else finished breathing. Devore laughed. "Take it. I want to see him fight beetles with dinner." I took the paper. "Good." Luma looked at me as we left the office. "You were planning to take it anyway." "Yes." "How many familiars are you bringing?" "All of them." "And if they break?" I looked at the damaged salty dog walking beside us on 3 legs. Its cracked surface had changed since the hammer test. Thin, dark lines now ran through the crust like tiny marks burned into it. I had not put them there. Luma noticed them too. What are those? I touched one line. A new piece of knowledge entered my mind. Experience. The dog had survived 3 real impacts. Its crust remembered. The first hidden rule had been ingredients. Now the second had just appeared in front of both of us. Before I could explain, the dog lifted its broken leg. Then it placed the foot on the floor. The crack sealed by itself. Luma went pale. I stared at the repaired crust. The bell for afternoon missions rang above us, and somewhere on the upper floor, I heard Devor shouting that he would personally come watch me fail. The beginner pest mission was supposed to take an hour. Devor brought 23 students to watch me fail. That was generous of him. Storage Building 3 stood behind the alchemy wing, half buried in the hill. The cellar door had been scratched from the inside. A clerk handed me a brass tag and explained the rules in front of everyone. 30 cellar beetles confirmed. Each is worth around 8 combat points. The mission is complete when the nest queen is destroyed. Damage to stored grain will be deducted from the reward. Devor leaned against the wall with his silver jackal. 4 silver reward, he said loudly. Try not to eat your troops before you get paid. The students laughed. I opened my bag. 8 bread familiars climbed out. The laughter became louder. Then the pepper dog sneezed and set the grass on fire. The laughter stopped while Luma stamped the flame out with her boot. I had spent the morning modifying the group. 3 salty dogs were defenders. Their cost was a little above 1 copper each because of the extra salt. 2 oil-rich dogs were runners. Each cost around 1.5 copper. 2 plain dogs cost less than 1 copper. The pepper dog was expensive by my standards, almost 3 copper. Total replacement cost for the entire group was under 12 copper. The reward was 400. Even if every familiar died, my gross return would be more than 30 times the cost. That was before counting the bread I could still eat. Devor saw me counting coins in my palm. Nervous? No. Calculating how many times I can afford to lose. A few students near him stopped smiling. Luma did not. She had spent breakfast helping me prepare strips of dough for emergency repairs. The club had eaten thick wheat cakes with onion, hot oil, and a little pepper. I had used the same batch to make 2 runners. There was something deeply satisfying about an army that shared ingredients with breakfast. I opened the cellar door. The smell hit first. Dust, mold, old grain. Then came the clicking. Dozens of black shapes moved between the sacks. Cellar beetles were the size of plates. Their shells were hard enough to break fingers. Individually, they were weak. In groups, they could strip a grain room in one night. I sent the 2 runners first. They moved low and fast, bodies bending around barrels where ordinary crust would have cracked. The beetles reacted immediately. 12 chased them. That was what I wanted. The runners circled back. 3 salty dogs blocked the passage. The beetles crashed into them. The sound was ridiculous, like someone throwing dinner plates at loaves of bread. The first salty dog slid backward but stayed intact. The second bit a beetle leg and held on. The third took 2 beetles directly on its chest. Dark experience lines appeared across its crust. The watching students pressed closer to the doorway. Devor's expression changed. Those lines again. I pointed at the pepper dog. Now! It opened its mouth. A burst of heat rolled down the passage. Not a fireball, more like a baker opening an oven built by someone with anger issues. 3 beetles flipped onto their backs. The plain dogs attacked the exposed undersides. The first exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. 6 beetles were dead. 1 runner had lost half an ear. No familiar had broken. The brass mission tag in my hand warmed. The clerk outside called out the official count. 6 confirmed! The crowd reacted at once. Someone said my name. Someone else shouted that the bread was winning. Devor told them to shut up. That helped more than anything I could have said. We moved deeper. The beetles stopped charging blindly after the first group died. They gathered around the queen chamber and formed a shell wall. 24 ordinary beetles remained. The queen was behind them. I could have ordered a direct attack. I did not. Strength was useful. Cheap strength was better. Cheap strength that came home was best. I sent 1 runner up a stack of sacks. It jumped from the top onto a wooden support beam and crawled along it upside down, oily dough flexing where dry bread would have snapped. The students behind me went quiet. The runner reached the far side. I gave one command: drop. It fell behind the beetle wall. The formation turned. That was enough. The defenders charged from the front. The pepper dog burned the left edge. The plain dogs slipped through the center. For 10 seconds, the cellar became complete chaos. Beetles clicked. Students shouted. One storage sack split and grain poured across the floor. I heard the clerk yell, "That comes out of the reward!" I remembered the price of grain. Then I adjusted my angle. The pepper dog sneezed directly into a beetle face. The beetle ran in a circle while smoking. Luma laughed so hard she had to hold the door frame. Devor did not laugh. His silver jackal had a combat score of 180. My entire group together still did not equal that on paper. On the floor, paper had stopped mattering. The queen finally emerged. It was twice the size of the others, with a dark green shell and heavy cutting jaws. The mission tag pulsed. 42 combat points. That was 3 times my strongest individual dog. Devor smiled again. There, that is where this ends. The queen rushed. I sent the oldest salty dog forward, the same one Brock had struck 3 times. Its crust had repaired itself, but the experience lines remained. The queen's jaws closed around its side. The dog did not break. It twisted. Its bite caught one joint below the queen's head. The number on the mission tag flickered as their forces met. The dog's endurance had risen again. 22 had become 28, a 27% increase from surviving real danger. Several students saw the number. One shouted it aloud. Devor's smile died for the second time that day. The queen lifted the dog and threw it against the wall. Its body cracked in 2. Luma inhaled sharply. I did not move. The pepper dog attacked the exposed joint. Heat entered the crack the defender had created. The 2 runners wrapped themselves around the queen's rear legs. The plain dogs attacked the soft underside. The queen collapsed. The mission tag flashed hot against my palm. "Queen confirmed!" the clerk shouted. "Mission complete!" The cellar exploded with cheering. Not because the mission was important. Beginner pest work happened every week. They cheered because 30 students had come to watch the zero-score baker get humiliated and had instead watched 8 pieces of bread execute a battlefield plan. That kind of story moved faster than fire. Devor stepped into the cellar. This was staged. The cheering weakened. He pointed at the mission tag. Those beetles were weaker than recorded. The clerk looked offended. The tag is calibrated. Devor ignored him. He pointed at me. You arranged this. The club arranged this. Someone changed the nest. Luma's face hardened. I picked up the broken halves of my oldest defender. The crust was crushed. The inside was torn. The little dark seed eyes were gone. I held both pieces in one hand. Then I looked at Devor. You brought the witnesses. The students around him went silent. His face changed. That sentence hurt him more than an argument. He had invited them because he expected my failure. Now every person there knew exactly whose idea the audience had been. The clerk raised the brass tag. 30 beetles and 1 queen. Officially confirmed. Storage damage is 1 torn grain sack. Deduction is 20 copper. Final reward is 3 silver and 80 copper. 380 copper. My replacement cost was under 12, so the mission paid for more than 300 basic bread dogs. I put 50 copper aside. For the club, I told Luma. I need people who do not steal my flour. The club's available money rose from 28 copper to 78. I still had 3 silver and 30 copper personally, 8 registered familiars, and a public score of 0. That last number had become funny. We returned to the club with half the basement following us. The story reached the public board before we did. Someone had crossed out the phrase, "zero-score baker." Under it, in large letters, they had written, "Beetle King." I disliked the title. Luma loved it. Better than baker? Barely. We spent 40 copper that afternoon on better flour, oil, salt, pepper, onions, herbs, and a cheap piece of meat the club had not been able to afford for 2 weeks. The rest stayed in a jar. Dinner was the first quiet moment of the day. Luma browned chopped meat in a pan until the edges became dark. I mixed the fat into dough with herbs and onion, then baked thick stuffed rolls. The crust came out crisp. The inside stayed soft and soaked up the meat juice. 6 club members sat around the old table. No one talked for the first minute. That was how I knew the food was good. Then one student asked if the rolls could come alive. Everyone stopped chewing. I looked at the tray. Only if I shaped them as familiars. 6 people relaxed at once. Luma stared at her roll. Maybe warn us before dinner next time. I tore mine open. Steam rose from the meat filling. If it bites you first, do not eat it. That became the club's first rule. After dinner, I placed the broken defender pieces in a bowl. I wanted to test something. Experience had remained in the crust after repair. What happened after death? I added warm water. The bread softened. Then I kneaded it back into dough. The dark experience lines disappeared from the surface. For a moment, I thought the accumulated growth was gone. Then knowledge entered my hands again. Not all of it had vanished. Roughly 1/5 remained. 20%. The dough remembered danger. Luma watched from across the table. You are making him again? Yes. She did not ask why I called a piece of bread him. That was one reason I liked having her there. I added new flour and salt, shaped the dog again, and put it in the oven. When the door opened, the familiar stepped out. Same size, same seed eyes. But this time, before I gave a command, it walked directly to the place beside my left foot, the place where the old one had always stood. Luma stopped breathing for a second. So it remembers. Partly. I tested it. The new body started at 16 combat points instead of 14. Its endurance started at 24 instead of 22. Not a full return, but enough. A familiar that survived gained experience. A familiar that died could be remade with about 1/5 of that growth preserved. That meant my losses were not pure losses. Death itself could become training material. I looked at the flour sacks, then at the stove, then at the dog. The Academy spent years raising beasts because a dead familiar meant a lost contract, lost core, and often years of work. My dead familiar became tomorrow's stronger doe. That was not a small advantage. That was a different economy of war. Someone knocked on the club door. It was the mission clerk. Behind him stood Brock. Brock looked around the room, at the new ingredients, the students eating, and the remade dog beside my foot. His eyes narrowed. The department head wants a demonstration tomorrow. Why? Because your provisional registration has caused complaints. From whom? Brock glanced at the dog. Licensed summoners, contract suppliers, familiar handlers. Of course, a free familiar was funny when it scored 14 points. It became less funny when it earned 380 copper in one afternoon. Luma folded her arms. What happens at the demonstration? Brock answered her instead of me. Karen will decide whether bread constructs qualify as legal familiars or prohibited artificial summons. That was the first time I heard the department head's name. Brock's voice became colder. If they are prohibited, every creature Arvin made will be destroyed. The room went still. The bread dog beside my foot growled. Brock looked down at it. For the first time since he had eaten my first familiar, he did not reach for it. I noticed that. So did everyone else. By midnight, the notice was posted on the Academy board. Public demonstration, main training yard, noon. Attendance permitted. By breakfast, more than 200 students had signed their names beneath it. Devore had added a message at the bottom. He would bring his silver jackal and personally prove that my familiars were toys. Luma read the line twice. He really wants an audience. I looked at the flour stacked beside the stove. He keeps giving me one. We had 38 silver worth of possible missions on the board that week. We had enough ingredients to make more than 100 basic familiars. We had 1 day of experience, and now we had 200 witnesses. I began kneading. By sunrise, the dough on the table was no longer shaped like dogs. It was shaped like shields. By noon, the main training yard looked less like a class and more like an execution. 312 students filled the stone seats. 26 instructors stood along the rail. The public scoreboard had been moved outside so everyone could see the measurements. In the center of the yard stood Devore with his silver jackal. Beside him stood Karen. The department head was a tall man with gray at his temples and the expression of someone who had spent 20 years watching students discover new ways to damage expensive property. He was not smiling. That made him immediately more dangerous than Brock. Brock wanted me embarrassed. Karen wanted the academy protected. Those were different motives. The result could still destroy my familiars. Luma walked beside me carrying 2 baskets covered with cloth. The crowd noticed them. Whispers rolled across the seats. Devore looked at the baskets and laughed. "You brought lunch." "Yes." That answer confused him. Karen raised one hand. The yard became quiet. Yesterday, Arvin completed a registered mission using uncontracted animated bread. Today we determine 3 things: whether these constructs are controllable, whether they are safe, whether they qualify as familiars under Academy law. His eyes moved to me. If they fail any section, they will be prohibited until further review. I nodded. "What counts as failure?" Saren pointed at the first lane. "Control. 10 moving targets. No civilian marker may be struck." The second lane held 3 iron frames. Endurance. Minimum required score is 20. The final lane was an open combat circle. Combat. A registered opponent will test whether your creations can obey complex commands under pressure. Devore scratched the silver jackal behind one ear. There it was. He had volunteered. Of course he had. Saren continued. "You may use up to 10 familiars. Devore may use 1. The combat test ends when one side can no longer continue." The audience reacted. 10 against 1 sounded generous until the scoreboard lit up. Devore's silver jackal had improved since the entrance test. 192 combat points. The strongest bread dog I had brought yesterday had 16. 10 ordinary copies would still be weaker on paper. Devore spread his hands toward the seats. I asked for 20. Students laughed. Saren did not. 10 is the legal swarm limit for provisional familiars. I looked at him. "Then 10 is enough." Devore smiled. "You said that very calmly." I made breakfast first. Luma coughed to hide a laugh. The audience did not bother hiding theirs. That was the first small shift of the day. Yesterday, laughter had belonged to Devore. Today, he had to share it. I removed the cloth from the first basket. 10 flat bread shapes lay inside. They were not dogs. Each had 2 legs, 2 thick arms, and a broad, square body. A round shield had been shaped directly onto one arm. Salt crystals glittered in the crust. The crowd became quiet. Devore stared. "What are those?" "Lunch with discipline." This time, even Karen's mouth moved slightly. I placed all 10 on the ground. They stood together, not in a random cluster, in 2 straight rows. That was the new rule I had discovered before dawn. Figures divided from one batch shared formation. 10 separate batches needed 10 precise commands. 10 bodies from one batch could turn on one. I had tested groups of 5, 10, and 20. 10 was the most stable with our stove. The whole squad cost 19 copper. Devore's jackal contract had cost 78 silver, or 7,800 copper. The price difference was more than 400 times. Karen pointed toward the moving targets. "Begin." 10 wooden discs began sliding across the first lane. Red circles marked civilians. Black circles marked enemies. I gave one command. "Line." The soldiers formed a row. "Throw." Each one pulled a hard piece of baked dough from its back and threw it. 10 crackers flew across the lane. 7 hit black targets. 3 missed. No red target was touched. The audience murmured. Devore folded his arms. 70%. Mediocre. I had expected that. The squad had never seen moving targets before. Real experience mattered. I ordered a second throw. 8 hits. Third throw. 9. Dark lines began appearing across the soldier's arms. Fourth throw. 10 black targets fell together. The crowd made one sound. A single, sharp wave of surprise. The scoreboard recorded 91% average accuracy across 4 rounds. More important, the final round was perfect. Karen looked at the dark lines. They learned during the test. Yes. How quickly? I do not know yet. That answer pleased him more than pretending I knew everything. He pointed to the endurance frames. The soldiers moved as one squad. 3 heavy bars dropped. The first rank raised shields. The impact cracked several arms. No soldier fell. The board flashed. Average endurance was 26. The minimum was 20. The yard erupted again. Brock stepped forward. That is impossible. Yesterday his best unit barely reached 28 after combat. I looked at him. These have more salt. A student in the front row shouted, "Professor, maybe eat one and check." The entire yard exploded with laughter. Brock's face turned red. He looked toward the speaker but could not identify who had said it. Luma did not look at me. I did not look at her. Neither of us needed to. The story of the first bred dog had now become public property. Brock had created the joke himself. Karen raised his hand again. Combat test. Devore entered the circle. His jackal moved beside him like liquid silver. He was no longer smiling. That was reasonable. He had spent 2 years training the animal. His family had paid for its core, contract, feeding, medicine, and handler fees. I had learned from the public registry that his annual cost was around 120 silver, 12,000 copper every year. My current monthly ingredient budget was under 500. Devore's anger was not only pride. If my method became legal, it threatened the value of everything he had invested in. He looked at the audience. Before we begin, I want one condition. Karen frowned. This is a test, not a duel. If he wins, I will withdraw my complaint. The crowd reacted. Devore continued. If I win, he admits publicly that bred constructs are inferior to true familiars and stops using them in academy missions. Luma stepped forward. That is not equal. Devore looked at her. It is more than equal. He has 10. I raised one hand before Karen could answer. I accept if you add one thing. Devore narrowed his eyes. What? If I win, you pay the club 30 silver. Silence. 30 silver was 3,000 copper, 2.5 months of the club's entire allowance. Devore laughed once. You think 10 crackers are worth 30 silver? No, I think your confidence is. The audience roared. Devore's ears turned red. He looked around and understood too late that refusing would hurt more than paying. Fine. Karen rubbed his forehead. This is why I hate public demonstrations. He made both sides sign the academy wager form. Then he stepped out of the circle. Begin. The silver jackal vanished, not literally. It moved so fast that the eye lost it for a moment. 192 points against a squad whose individual combat values ranged from 17 to 21. The first bred soldier exploded. Crumbs flew across the circle. The crowd gasped. The jackal turned and destroyed a second, then a third. Devore laughed. That is the difference. He was right about one thing. 1 against 1, there was no contest. That was why I had never planned to fight 1 against 1. Close. The remaining 7 soldiers snapped together. Shields overlapped. Because they came from one batch, the formation changed instantly. The jackal struck again. This time it hit 3 shields at once. 1 cracked, 2 held. The impact was distributed through the formation. The scoreboard flashed with a new effective endurance number, 41. The crowd shouted. Devore stopped laughing. Move, he ordered. The jackal circled. My squad turned as one body. Its raw speed was much lower. Its turning delay was almost 0. The jackal struck the left side. The formation rotated. It struck the right. The shields were already there. Experience lines spread across the surviving crust. 20 combat points became 22. 22 became 24. The soldiers were learning the jackal's rhythm while Davor watched. He realized it too. Break them now. The jackal leaped over the shield line. That was the first mistake. Fold. The squad split into 2 halves. 3 soldiers fell flat. 2 grabbed the jackal's rear legs. Another wrapped both arms around its neck. Oil in the joints let their bodies bend far beyond normal bred. The jackal twisted. 1 soldier broke. The others held. I gave the second command. Heat. The remaining soldier in the rear opened its chest. I had mixed pepper paste into the center of its body. Hot air burst outward. The jackal yelped. Not injured badly, surprised. That was enough. The shield units piled onto it. For 3 seconds, the most expensive student familiar in our year disappeared under a heap of bred soldiers. The image was so absurd that half the audience started laughing before the fight was over. Devore screamed commands. The jackal threw off 2 soldiers. 1 hit the boundary stone and shattered. Another lost an arm, but the last 4 locked their shields around the jackal's legs. The combat board measured mobility. The silver jackal's movement fell from full speed to 12%, then 6%, then 0. Karen raised his hand. Stop! Devore stared at him. It can still fight. It cannot move without destroying the trapped units at point-blank range, and your familiar has already suffered heat stress. The test is control under pressure, not killing. Devore's mouth opened. Karen's voice became harder. Stop! Devore lowered his hand. The yard was silent. Karen looked at the board, then at me. 10 provisional constructs against 1 registered familiar. 7 destroyed or disabled. Objective achieved. Commands remained stable. No loss of control. He turned toward the audience. Combat test passed. The sound that followed shook dust from the seats. Students stood. People shouted my name. Someone started chanting, Baker. I preferred that to Beetle King. Devore stood in the middle of the circle, while his jackal climbed out from under 4 battered bread soldiers. He looked at the audience, then at me. His face had gone pale. I walked to the wager table. The clerk placed a receipt in front of him, 30 silver. Devore's hand tightened. For a moment I thought he would refuse. 300 students watched him. Karen watched him. Brock watched him. Luma stood beside the club basket, arms folded. Devore took out his academy credit seal. The transfer crystal flashed. 30 silver moved to the cooking club account. The public board updated automatically. Old balance, less than 1 silver. New balance, more than 31. A few club members in the seats started screaming. Luma closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, she looked at me differently. Not because of the fight, because she knew what 30 silver meant downstairs. Fuel for winter, fresh food, repairs. No more counting onion slices. Devore signed the withdrawal of his complaint. His humiliation was complete because no one had forced him into it. He had chosen the audience. He had chosen the wager. He had chosen the opponent. I had only accepted. Karen called me to the center. The constructs qualify for limited familiar status. The cheering started again. He raised his voice. Limited. The yard quieted. Maximum active number remains 10 until safety research is complete. Large-scale production is prohibited. Sale or transfer is prohibited. Mission use is allowed. There it was. The victory and the wall behind it. 10. I could create more than 100 with our current supplies. The Academy would only let me deploy 10. I looked at Karen. What would change the limit? Evidence? How much? 100 successful command hours without uncontrolled behavior. 20 registered missions. A written safety review. The crowd groaned. I did the numbers. 20 missions at an average reward of 4 silver would pay 80 silver. The requirement was not a punishment. It was a staircase. Fine. Karen raised one eyebrow. You sound pleased. I like measurable problems. That answer made him study me for several seconds. Then he turned to Brock. His score must be corrected. Brock stiffened. The entrance test measures class potential. It currently says 0. That was the result. Karen pointed at the destroyed bread soldiers scattered around the combat circle. Does 0 accurately describe what we just saw? The entire yard waited. Brock had nowhere to go. If he said yes, he looked incompetent. If he said no, he admitted the public test had been wrong. A student shouted, "Give him 14! That was the first dog!" Laughter broke out. Another shouted, 22 with salt! More laughter. Brock's jaw tightened until I could see the muscle move. Finally, he walked to the board. He erased the 0. The new provisional rating appeared. 148. That was the combined evaluated value of my 10-unit squad after formation bonuses. My status moved from last place in the class to the upper third in one afternoon. The reaction was immediate. Students pulled out notebooks. People who had ignored me 3 days ago began asking where the cooking club was. 2 instructors asked Karen for copies of the combat data. Brock walked away before the crowd could ask him anything. Devore stayed. He came to me after the seats had started emptying. His face was still tight. I hate this. I noticed. He looked at the remaining bread soldiers. My family supplies contract ink to 3 academies. That explained more than all his insults. If this spreads, people lose money. Yes. You say that like you do not care. I care, I just care about different people. I looked toward Luma. The club members were already discussing a new stove. Devor followed my eyes. His expression changed slightly. Not friendly, less simple. You will make enemies bigger than me. I assume so. He gave a short, humorless laugh. At least you are not stupid. Then he left. That evening, the cooking club bought meat twice as good as the day before. Not because we needed to celebrate, because Luma insisted. We spent 1 silver and 12 copper on food, fuel, and a repaired stove hinge. The club still had more than 30 silver left. I made soft rolls with butter brushed across the tops. Luma cooked thin slices of meat with onion until the edges browned, then filled the rolls while they were still hot. We added pepper to one tray and herbs to another. The room smelled so good that students from 2 floors above came downstairs pretending they had business in the basement. We fed 18 people. The cost was less than 1 silver. 3 of them offered to pay. I refused the first time. Luma did not. She put a jar by the door. Cooking club donation. By the end of dinner, the jar held 1 silver and 43 copper. I looked at her. She looked at me. Numbers, she said. I nodded. Good numbers. After everyone left, we sat beside the stove with the surviving soldiers between us. 4 had returned from the demonstration. 6 had been destroyed. I soaked the broken pieces in warm water. The experienced lines dissolved into the dough. Again, around 1/5 of the gained improvement remained. But something else happened this time. The 10 soldiers had been made from 1 batch. When I kneaded all the broken pieces together, the surviving memory did not stay separated. It mixed. The new dough remembered the squad's formation. I shaped 5 fresh soldiers from it. When they came out of the oven, I did not give a command. They formed a shield wall by themselves. Luma slowly put down her cup. Arvin? I see it. Tell me that is normal. It is bread standing in military formation. Fair point. Knowledge moved through my hands again. My class had crossed a threshold. Baker of Life had reached its next path. Master of dough forms. I accepted it. Nothing flashy happened. No light filled the room. My understanding simply became deeper. A shape was not only a body. A shape could carry function. A shield made a defender. Long legs made a runner. Wide wings could make a glider. A hollow body could carry heat. The recipe changed material properties. The form changed purpose. 1 cheat. More consequences. I looked at the old stove. It was suddenly too small. Luma followed my gaze. We can afford a larger one now. Yes, she smiled. Tomorrow? Before I could answer, someone knocked 3 times. Not the casual knock of a student. Official. Saren entered with a woman from Academy Logistics. Her name was Nemi. She placed a sealed mission packet on the table. The Academy has a problem. I looked at the seal. Red. Not beginner work. Nemi continued. A caravan carrying winter grain was attacked 2 hours ago. The escort lost 6 contracted familiars. Replacement contracts would cost more than 400 silver and take 3 weeks. 400 silver. 40,000 copper. The room became very quiet. Saren looked at my 5 soldiers standing in formation beside the stove. You need command hours. Yes. We need cheap bodies. Yes. Nemi placed a second paper on the table. Temporary deployment waiver. Maximum active count, 50. Luma's eyes widened. Yesterday, 10 had been illegal. Now the Academy wanted 50. I looked at the reward line. 50 silver for recovery of the grain. Another 20 if the raiders were captured. 70 silver total. 7,000 copper. I calculated the flour cost for 50 soldiers. Less than 1 silver. Then Nemi placed a third paper on the table. There is one more thing. The escort had reported that the raiders were not human. They were stone creatures, and according to the surviving handler, when one of them cracked open, the inside smelled like fresh bread. 50 soldiers took less than 3 hours to bake, and less than 1 silver to replace. That sentence frightened Karen more than the stone raiders. I could see it on his face when dawn reached the basement windows. 5 squads stood across the cooking club floor, 10 soldiers in each, 2 shield ranks, 1 runner group with oil-rich joints, 1 pepper group with hollow bodies designed to hold heat, 1 mixed group carrying hard-baked spears. They had cost 87 copper in flour, salt, oil, pepper, fuel, and seeds. The Academy's destroyed escort familiars had cost more than 40,000 copper. The difference was not 10%. It was not double. It was more than 400 times. Nemi checked the count twice. 50. Yes. She looked at the club stove. You made 50 since last night? Yes. She looked at Luma. Luma was packing flatbread, roasted onions, and strips of salted meat into cloth bundles. Does he sleep? Nemi asked. Luma tied the final bundle. Sometimes, while dough rises. Karen did not laugh. He signed the deployment seal himself. Every unit is your responsibility. If one attacks a civilian, the waiver ends. Understood. If you lose control, I destroy the rest. Understood. If you discover anything unusual about the raiders, you report it before bringing material inside the academy. I looked at him. That one sounds specific. His eyes moved to the 5 squads. The academy has existed for 900 years. Specific rules usually exist because someone once did something stupid. That was fair. We left with Nemi, Luma, 2 academy guards, and 12 student observers selected by the mission office. Karen came too. He said it was for safety. I suspected he also wanted to see with his own eyes what 50 cheap familiars could do. The attacked caravan was 7 miles north of the Academy Road. We reached it before noon. 3 wagons were overturned. Grain sacks lay split across the grass. Deep marks cut through the road where something heavy had dragged stone feet. No bodies. That was good. The surviving escort had escaped with injuries. The 6 contracted familiars had not. Pieces of broken collars still lay near the ditch. Nemi picked one up. This collar alone cost 9 silver. 900 copper. I looked at my nearest shield soldier. Its entire body had cost less than 2. The soldier looked back at me with seed eyes. The comparison was becoming rude. Luma crouched beside one of the drag marks. There! A crumb lay in the dirt, except it was not a normal crumb. It looked like gray stone until I pressed it between my fingers. The inside was porous, baked, and the smell was faint but unmistakable. Wheat. Karen took it from my hand. His face changed. You recognize it? I asked. No, he answered too quickly. Nemi noticed. So did Luma. I said nothing. The tracks led toward an abandoned quarry. I divided the 50 units into 5 squads and sent the runners ahead. Because each squad came from 1 batch, I needed only 1 command per 10 soldiers for basic movement. 5 commands moved 50 bodies. The student observers started counting. One whispered, "That should require 50 separate bindings." Another answered, "He does not have bindings." Good. Let them explain it to each other. Stories spread better when I did not have to sell them. The first stone creature attacked at the quarry entrance. It stepped out from behind a broken cart. At a distance, it looked like a rough human statue. Up close, I saw the truth. Its body was layered, a hard gray crust outside, a lighter, porous material inside. The joints had been folded like braided dough before baking. It was not stone shaped into a person. It was something soft that had become stone in an oven. The creature swung one arm. A shield soldier raised its guard. The impact destroyed the shield and half the soldier's body. The mission crystal Nemi carried measured the attacker. 74 combat points. The observers swore. Karen stepped forward. Retreat. That is above the beginner field limit. I looked past the first creature. 5 more were moving among the quarry walls. Then 10. Then more. The count reached 18. The weakest measured 68 points. The strongest measured 116. 50 bread soldiers against 18 stone constructs. On paper, the stone side had more than twice our total combat value. Luma looked at me. How much did they cost? I understood what she meant. Unknown. No, ours. 87 copper. She nodded toward the quarry. Then we can afford to learn. Karen stared at her. I almost smiled. She had learned my language. I sent the first shield squad forward. The stone creatures charged. The first collision broke 4 soldiers. The second broke 2 more. The observers reacted exactly as expected. The whispers became nervous. Karen reached for the emergency seal. Arvin, not yet. I watched the broken soldiers. The stone creatures did not crush them completely. They stepped over them. Their movement mattered. Heavy bodies, stiff outer crust, flexible folded joints, like my salt defenders, only taken to an extreme. Hardness had created a weakness. The joints were narrow. I sent the runners. Oil-rich soldiers slid low across the ground. They did not attack the chest or head. They wrapped around ankles, knees, and elbows. The stone creatures swung down. The runners bent. 2 broke. 8 stayed attached. Pepper Squad. 10 hollow soldiers opened vents in their chests. Heat rolled across the quarry. The stone constructs ignored it. Karen frowned. It is not enough. I know. I had never expected heat to destroy something already baked. I wanted expansion. The joints warmed, the outer layers shifted slightly. Then I gave the command I had prepared that morning. Water. The mixed squad threw small clay cups. Not magic, just water. Cold water struck hot joints. The first stone creature cracked at the knee. A sound like a plate breaking echoed across the quarry. The creature fell. Every observer saw it. Nemi's crystal flashed. 104 combat points dropped to 37 mobility. Luma pointed. Again! The student observers started shouting before I did. Heat the joints! Water after! Left one first! They were no longer watching a failure. They were watching a method spread in real time. The Pepper Squad heated. The mixed squad threw water. Cracks opened. Shield soldiers rushed the damaged legs. Hard-baked spears entered the fractures. 1 stone construct fell. Then another. Then 3 together. Dark experience lines spread across my surviving soldiers so quickly that the crusts looked striped. The mission crystal updated their average values. 22 combat points became 26. 26 became 31. Some shield units reached 38 endurance. 1 runner that survived 2 direct impacts rose from 19 to 27 combat points in less than 15 minutes. The student observers shouted every increase aloud. Karen stopped reaching for the emergency seal. He started watching the numbers. That was the moment I knew the mission had changed him from judge to witness. The strongest stone construct entered the fight last, 116 points. It was larger than the others and had a symbol pressed into its chest. A circle crossed by 3 lines. Karen saw it. His face went white. Stop. The word was not for me. It was fear. The construct slammed both hands into the ground. The quarry floor cracked. 4 bread soldiers shattered from the shock. 2 observers fell. Luma grabbed one by the coat and pulled him behind a wagon. I sent every remaining shield unit forward. 23 familiars were still functional. 17 formed the wall. 6 runners moved around the sides. The stone construct hit the formation. 5 soldiers broke instantly. The others held for 1 second, then 2, then 3. Their shared formation spread the force. Experience lines burned darker. Effective formation endurance climbed past 50, then 60. Saren stared at the crystal. 63. The number came from his mouth, not mine. That mattered. I sent the runners up the stone creature's back. They wrapped its elbows. The Pepper Squad heated the knees. Luma threw the first water cup herself. The joint cracked. The observers cheered. A second cup hit. The left knee broke. The creature dropped. The remaining spear soldiers attacked the symbol on its chest. The outer layer split. Something glowed inside. Not a beast core. An old metal disc surrounded by dark, baked material. The construct reached for it. I ordered 3 soldiers to pull. The disc came free. The stone creature froze. Then it collapsed into gray pieces. Silence covered the quarry. Nemi looked at the disc. Saren looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I picked it up. The metal was warm. The same 3-line symbol had been stamped on both sides. Now you recognize it, I said. Saren did not answer. Nemi did. That is the old Academy seal. Every observer heard her. Saren closed his eyes briefly. There was no hiding it now. The stone raiders were connected to the Academy. We found the stolen grain deeper in the quarry. 38 sacks remained intact. 7 had been torn open. More important, we found 11 missing cargo workers alive inside an old storage tunnel. The stone creatures had not killed them. They had locked them away and taken the grain. That was strange. A wild construct did not need grain. A broken guardian did not usually steal food. Something had ordered them to collect it. The recovered workers watched my bread soldiers carry sacks back to the wagons. One man stared for almost a full minute. Finally, he asked, "Are those bread?" "Yes." He pointed at a soldier carrying a sack twice its own size. "Why?" I considered the question. "Budget?" He nodded as if that explained everything. We returned to the academy before sunset. Word had arrived ahead of us through Nemi's communication crystal. More than 400 students waited near the mission gate. The public board showed the recovery result. 38 grain sacks saved, 11 workers rescued, 18 hostile constructs neutralized, human deaths 0. We had deployed 50 bread familiars and lost 17. Their replacement ingredients cost 31 copper. The crowd repeated that number. 6 contracted escort familiars lost before our arrival would cost more than 400 silver to replace. Nemi announced 50 silver for the grain, 20 for the threat and rescue, and 10 as an emergency bonus. 80 silver total, 8,000 copper. My mission income in 3 days had passed 83 silver, and the cooking club that began with 28 copper now held more money than some combat teams saw in a term. The cheering became painful to the ears. Then Karen stepped onto the platform. His expression had changed during the ride home. The fear was gone. Duty had replaced it. I knew what was coming before he spoke. Effective immediately, all bread familiar production is suspended pending investigation. The gate became silent. Luma looked at him. Nemi's head snapped around. Karen continued. The recovered constructs were made through an unknown process connected to Academy history. Arvin's creations show material similarities. Until we understand the risk, no additional units may be produced. Students began shouting. He raised his voice. "This is a safety order." His motive made sense. His conclusion did not. I climbed onto the platform. Karen looked at me. "Do not make this harder. I am making it measurable." The crowd quieted again. I pointed at Nemi's mission crystal. "You required evidence of control." "Yes." "How many active familiars did I command today?" 50. "For how long?" Nemi answered before he could. 4 hours and 12 minutes from deployment to final dismissal. I looked at Karen. "That is more than 200 familiar command hours." His eyes narrowed. The requirement meant operational hours. The written rule says successful command hours. Nemi slowly opened the waiver packet. The crowd leaned forward. She read the line, then looked at Karen. "He is correct." A wave of laughter moved through the gate plaza. Karen's mouth tightened. I continued. "You also required a safety review." "That has not happened." Nemi supervised logistics. You supervised safety. 12 students observed. 2 academy guards observed. 11 rescued workers observed. Did any bread familiar attack a civilian? No. Did any refuse a command? No. Did any continue fighting after dismissal? No. The crowd grew louder with every answer. Karen understood what was happening. He had built the standards because he wanted evidence. Now the evidence was standing around him. I did not need to insult him. His own checklist was doing it for me. Nemi raised the mission crystal. "Logistics certifies control." One of the academy guards shouted from below. "Field escort certifies safety." The 12 student observers started yelling at once. The crowd laughed. Karen lifted both hands. "Quiet!" It took nearly a minute. He looked at me for a long time. Then he exhaled. "Production suspension withdrawn." The plaza erupted. "But the sale ban remains." "The active limit is increased to 100 for academy missions only. Investigation continues." That was still a restriction. It was also 10 times yesterday's limit. The public board updated. My provisional score increased from 148 to 306 because of the mission data. My class rank moved again. Upper third became upper 10th. 3 days ago, I had been 0. Now the crowd chanted Baker while Saren stood beside the board that had just overruled his suspension. Publicly, with his own evidence. He looked at me after the noise finally weakened. "You enjoyed that?" "No." He raised one eyebrow. I enjoyed the number changing. For the first time, Saren laughed. Only once. Then he became serious again. The old seal is not public information. It is now. He looked at the hundreds of students around us. Yes, I noticed. That evening, the cooking club did not celebrate with expensive meat. We made soup. Luma said the day had been too loud, and she wanted food that did not fight back. She browned onions in the bottom of a large pot, added sliced roots, bits of meat, herbs, and water. I baked long loaves with a thick crust and soft center. We tore them by hand and dipped them into the broth. The soup was simple, hot, salty, heavy enough to make the room quiet. 24 people ate downstairs that night. The donation jar collected 3 silver and 11 copper. The club's food spending had increased. Its savings still rose faster. After everyone left, Luma and I sat on the floor beside the warm stove. She rested her head against the wall. You were dead 3 days ago. Yes. You got a 0 3 days ago. Yes. Now the Academy changed deployment law because of your bread. Yes. She looked at me. You are very bad at reacting to your own life. I already reacted once. A sign fell on me. She laughed and covered her face. When she lowered her hands, we were sitting closer than before. Neither of us moved away. Then the stove behind us made a sound. Not our stove. Something deeper. A heavy metallic boom came through the floor. The cups on the table shook. Every surviving bread familiar stood at once. I put my hand on the stone tiles. Warm. Too warm. Karen returned 10 minutes later with Nemi and 3 maintenance workers. They opened an iron hatch in the back storage room that I had assumed led to pipes. Stone stairs descended into darkness. Hot air rose from below. It smelled like old ash. And bread. Karen looked at me. You wanted to know the old seal? Yes. Come see why I tried to suspend you. We went down. The stairs continued farther than the basement should have allowed. 1 floor, 2, 3. The walls changed from cut stone to smooth gray material. I touched it. Porous beneath the surface. Layered. Baked. Exactly like the quarry constructs. Luma stood beside me. No. Karen kept walking. The passage opened into a chamber larger than the main training yard. At its center stood an oven. Calling it an oven felt stupid. It was a black stone structure 3 stories high, with a circular door wide enough for a wagon. Old metal channels ran from it into the walls in every direction. The 3-line seal covered the door. Heat pulsed behind it. Once every few seconds, the entire academy trembled. Saren spoke quietly. The oldest records call it the foundation kiln. I stared at the channels disappearing into the walls. What did it bake? Saren did not answer. He did not need to. My hand was still on the gray wall. Knowledge from Master of Dough forms moved through my fingers. Shape carried function. Material carried properties. A wall was only a very large shape. A tower was another. A gate was another. Then the oven door opened by 1 finger's width. Warm golden light spilled through the crack. Every bread familiar behind me dropped to 1 knee. Not because I commanded them. For the first time since they had awakened, they ignored me completely. A voice came from inside the ancient oven. 1 word. Baker. And high above us, every bell in the academy started ringing at once. By sunrise, the entire academy knew the oven had spoken. By breakfast, the capital had sent Orvin. He arrived in a black carriage with 6 licensed handlers, 2 legal clerks, and a familiar that looked like a lion made from dark iron. The beast walked beside him without making a sound. Its public combat score was 840. Students filled every balcony facing the central yard. The rumor board had stopped using Baker as a joke. Now it used the word like a title. Orvin hated that before he even met me. I could tell because he looked at the board first and at me second. So this is the student causing a market panic. I was eating breakfast. Luma had filled a warm roll with egg, onion, and the last slices of yesterday's meat. The outside was crisp. The center was soft enough to catch the hot yolk. I finished chewing before answering. I completed 3 missions. Contract ink prices fell 11% overnight. That sounds unrelated to breakfast. Several students nearby laughed. Orvin did not. Karen stood between us. The foundation kiln activated after Arvin entered the lower chamber. Orvin's expression hardened. That chamber should have remained sealed. Nemi folded her arms. It opened itself. Orvin looked at me again. Then we have two problems. I took another bite. Only two? Luma kicked my boot lightly under the table. Orvin had authority from the central summoning office. By noon, he had frozen every bread familiar mission in the academy and ordered my ingredients sealed. He did it publicly. That was his first mistake. The order appeared on the main board while more than 500 students watched. Reason given? Uncontrolled artificial army risk. I walked to the board with Karen, Nemi, Luma, Brock, Davor, and half the combat faculty behind us. Orvin stood on the platform. Your constructs are cheap because they avoid every safety system built into legal summoning. That is true. The crowd reacted to my answer. Orvin had expected denial. I continued. They also avoid blood contracts, forced bindings, beast core replacement, handler fees, and permanent loss when destroyed. More noise. Davor looked uncomfortable. His family sold contract ink, but even he did not argue. Orvin pointed toward the lower academy. The ancient kiln responded to them. No, it responded to me. That is worse. Probably. The crowd laughed again. Orvin's patience broke. You treat this like a joke because you do not understand scale. I looked at the academy walls. I understand scale better than I did yesterday. That stopped the laughter. Karen looked at me sharply. I had spent the night touching walls. Not dramatically. I had simply walked. Dormitory wall. Training hall. Dining room. South tower. Main gate. Every old structure gave my hands the same answer. Layered material, mineral flour, binding liquid, heat-shaped form. Not stone blocks. Baked mass. The newer buildings had been constructed normally around an older body. The original academy was one enormous creation. I had not told the students yet. Orvin apparently knew enough to fear the same conclusion. He changed tactics. Fine, we settle legality by the academy's oldest provision, public combat verification. Karen's face darkened. That rule is for disputed combat classes. His class is disputed. Orvin pointed at the Iron Lion. My registered familiar against whatever he can legally produce before sunset. If his creations demonstrate stable command under full combat pressure, I will lift the suspension and certify them for academy use. The crowd exploded. Luma looked at me. And if you lose? Orvin smiled. All production ends. Existing constructs are destroyed. The student is transferred to central custody for investigation. There it was. Local insult had become academic pressure. Academic pressure had become the capital wanting ownership of the baker. I looked at Orvin. One condition. He laughed. You are in no position to bargain. Then you are afraid to wager. 500 witnesses heard it. Orvin's smile disappeared. I continued. If I win, the cooking club receives 100 silver from the central office for emergency food service, and my class is recorded as legal without a production fee. 100 silver, 10,000 copper. The crowd went silent. Orvin stared at me, then at the students. He had made the same mistake Davor had made. He had chosen a public stage. Accepted. The board recorded it. I had 6 hours. My ingredients were sealed. Orvin had forgotten one thing. The cooking club owned its food. Nemi checked the order twice. Academy combat ingredients are sealed. Club food stock is not. Luma opened the pantry. We had flour purchased with donations, salt, oil, pepper, herbs, and enough fuel for normal meals. Not enough for hundreds of separate soldiers. I looked at the new large oven we had ordered after Davor's wager, then at the dough bowl. Separate soldiers needed separate baking space. One huge batch was cheaper. For 5 hours, the basement became a factory. Students carried water while Luma controlled the ingredients. Salt went outside, oil into the folds, pepper into internal channels, and veteran dough into the center. The final cost was 12 silver and 60 copper, or 1,260 copper. It was my most expensive creation, and still less than 1/6 of Davor's Jackal contract. Near sunset, we rolled it out. The crowd stopped talking. It was a loaf the size of a wagon. Golden brown armor covered the surface. Salt crystals formed pale lines across the crust. Small vents ran along both sides. Devor stared at it. You made a giant bread brick. Yes. Brock looked almost offended on behalf of education. Orvin laughed for the first time all day. That is your answer? Yes. The Iron Lion entered the arena. 840 combat points. The loaf's first measured score appeared. 211. The audience groaned. Orvin smiled. Begin. The lion charged. It crossed the arena in 3 seconds. Its first strike hit the loaf hard enough to crack the stone beneath it. The outer crust split. The crowd gasped. Orvin spread his hands. This is what happens when price replaces power. I looked at the crack. Open. The loaf moved. Not forward. Apart. The top crust lifted like a lid. The sides unfolded. Inside were rows. Then more rows. Then more. 240 small soldiers climbed out of one enormous baked body. The arena became silent enough to hear crumbs fall. Devor whispered one word. No. Luma smiled beside the rail. Oh, yes. Orvin pointed at the board. The active limit is 100, Karen answered before I could. Your verification order removed the mission limit for this combat test. Orvin turned on him. That is not what I meant. Karen's expression was completely calm. I have recently learned to read my own rules carefully. The crowd laughed so loudly that Orvin's face changed color. The Iron Lion attacked. 240 soldiers moved on one command. That was the real shock. They had all come from one batch, one shape divided into internal forms. The entire army carried the memory of every squad I had remade into the central dough. They did not need to learn formation. They were born knowing it. Wall. 80 shield soldiers formed 3 curved ranks. The lion hit them. 20 broke. 60 held. The board calculated combined endurance. 173. Then 206 as experience lines spread. The crowd began shouting the numbers. Split! The army opened around the lion. Oil-rich runners wrapped its legs. Spear units attacked joints. Pepper units opened chest vents. Heat rolled across the arena. The lion's iron body glowed dull red. Orvin shouted a command. The beast released a shockwave. 43 soldiers shattered. Crumbs filled the air like snow. The crowd recoiled. I watched the remaining number. 177. Replacement value of the destroyed units was a little above 2 silver. The lion's attack had consumed a core charge worth 18 silver. He was spending 9 times more to kill my troops than I was spending to lose them. I said it aloud. The audience heard. So did Orvin. His face became rigid. The lion attacked again. Another core charge. Another 31 soldiers destroyed. Replacement cost, less than 2 silver. Enemy cost, 18. The crowd started counting with me. That was when Orvin lost the battle, even though his familiar was still stronger. Every exchange became an advertisement for my economy. The third shockwave failed. The lion's core dimmed. My surviving soldiers had gained too much experience. Formation endurance passed 300. Individual spear units reached 40 combat points. The oldest shield group passed 50 endurance. One tiny soldier climbed onto the lion's head and hit it with a baked hammer. The hammer did almost nothing. 500 people still cheered like it had killed a dragon. Orvin screamed for the lion to crush the center. I had been waiting for that. The soldiers opened. At the heart of the unfolded loaf sat one round mass of dark dough. Every broken veteran from the last 4 days had contributed to it. Beetle fights, Devor's jackal, stone constructs, hammer tests, mission damage. All of it had been kneaded together. I shaped that center as one thing, a hand. The giant baked hand closed around the lion's front leg. The audience screamed. The lion pulled. The hand held. 211 initial points became 390 after formation memory, veteran dough, and live experience combined. Still weaker than 840. But the lion's core had spent 3 charges. Its current output had fallen below 500. Numbers changed fights. Costs changed wars. Heat. Pepper channels inside the giant hand ignited. The iron leg expanded. Water. The soldiers threw every cup they carried. Cold water struck hot metal. A crack opened at the lion's knee joint. The sound echoed across the arena. Orvin stopped moving. I gave one final command. Pull. The giant hand twisted. The damaged leg locked. 100 soldiers piled onto the lion from both sides. It fell. Not destroyed. Pinned. Its mobility score dropped. 30%, 17, 4, 0. Saren raised his hand. Combat verification complete. Orvin shouted, "It can still attack!" Saren looked at him. So could Devor's. Devor laughed from the front row. That was probably the happiest he had been around me. Orvin stared at the board, the army, and the crowd. In front of more than 500 witnesses, his 800-point elite familiar had spent 54 silver in core charges and still been pinned by bread costing 12 silver and 60 copper. Nemi brought the wager document. 100 silver to the cooking club. Orvin paid under the chanting crowd. Our resources passed 180 silver. The public board raised my score above 500, moved me into the Academy's top 10, recognized my class legally, and set the production fee at 0. Orvin had wanted a public warning. He had become one. Then the ground moved. Not from cheering, from below. The foundation kiln opened. A deep sound rolled through the academy. The walls became warm. Cracks of golden light appeared along the oldest towers. Students stopped cheering. Everyone looked up. The south wall flexed. Not cracked, flexed, like crust bending over soft bread. Karen whispered, "No." I put my hand on the arena floor. The answer was immediate now. The stone beneath us was not stone. The arena was part of a shape. The dormitories were part of a shape. The walls, towers, gates, old dining hall, and foundation passages were all connected through baked channels leading to the kiln. One enormous batch, one enormous form. The original academy had never been built. It had been baked. And if one batch produced one connected familiar, then the conclusion was simple. The academy itself was a sleeping familiar. I said it aloud. No one laughed. Orvin's face lost all color. He knew what the capital had been protecting. Karen looked at him. "You knew." Orvin did not answer. That was answer enough. The old central tower moved by less than an inch. 500 students screamed. Then the movement stopped. The golden cracks dimmed. Deep below us, the ancient voice spoke again. "Baker." This time I understood the second word, hungry. Everyone heard that one. The academy had spent 900 years feeding students above an oven that was apparently waiting for dinner. I looked at Luma. She looked at me. Then at the giant loaf army scattered across the arena. Do not say it. I was not going to. You were thinking about how much flour the academy would need. Yes. She closed her eyes. Devor started laughing. Even Karen sat down on the edge of the platform. Orvin recovered enough to speak. The central office will send a full commission. How many? I asked. His expression became bitter. Enough. That meant the next enemy would not be one professor, one department head, or one capital inspector. Good. Measurable problems were easier when they arrived in groups. That night, we went back to the cooking club. No banquet. No expensive celebration. Luma made onion soup again. I baked fresh bread. The crust cracked under my fingers. Steam rose from the center. We spread butter over warm slices and watched it melt into the soft crumb. The basement was crowded. Students from rich dormitories sat beside students who had once eaten only cheap porridge with us. Devor brought a bag of meat and claimed it was payment for watching my bread embarrass Orvin. Nemi brought flour. Karen brought the official certificate and left before anyone could make him wash dishes. Brock appeared last. The room became quiet when he entered. He placed something on the table, a small sack of seeds. The same dark seeds I had once used as eyes for my first bread dog. He looked at the dog beside my foot. The remade veteran stared back. Brock cleared his throat. I misjudged the entrance test. 20 people heard him. He looked as if each word cost more than a familiar contract. I waited. He added, and I should not have eaten it. The room exploded with laughter. Brock turned red. The veteran bread dog barked once. Luma nearly dropped the soup ladle. I took the sack of seeds. Accepted. That was enough. After midnight, the club finally emptied. Our account held more than 180 silver. My legal score was above 500. My active army could be rebuilt for a fraction of what one elite contract cost. The cooking club had food for weeks, fuel for winter, and a waiting list of students trying to join. 3 days earlier, I had slept on a bed supported by a brick. Luma had spent part of the new money on a fourth wooden leg. It was the most luxurious upgrade I had received. We sat on the repaired bed and listened to the academy breathe. That was what it sounded like now. A slow warmth through the walls, a faint movement under the floor, a sleeping giant with an oven for a heart. Luma rested her head on my shoulder. What happens when the commission arrives? I calculate. And if they try to take the kiln? I calculate faster. And if the academy wakes up hungry again? I looked at the flour sack by the door. We make breakfast. She laughed quietly. Below us, the foundation kiln answered with one deep metallic sound. The bread dog lifted its head. Every surviving soldier in the club turned toward the floor, and somewhere inside the baked walls, something enormous shifted in its sleep.